Hi, everybody. I'm going to give this about 30 seconds or so before we get this candle lit to completion, so to speak, because we have people joining and we want to make sure that everybody has a chance to get on the Zoom call before we get rolling here. But in the meantime, we're at some 35 partners and growing. Yeah, it is
over 40. It's going
over
up.
40. It's almost like I'm looking at the tote board here. the odds keep going up.
Right. I was going to say, thankfully, on Friday with R2, will be a lot lower than 40 to 1, 30 to 1, 20 to 1, and 10 to 1. So,
all right. We've stalled out at some 40 or more partners, and we'll get a few more, I'm sure, as we get rolling here. But we have 14 races to cover. You see the panel of experts distributed all over the screen here. At the bottom, Hollywood Squares is our own Jason Blewett, who is standing in front of the Flightline statue on the apron at Santa Anita, where we're all going to be convening over the next couple of days. Joe Bianca looks to be, in a nevermore place. Jeff Lowe is at home. We've got Dawn Leonard in her place, but ready to roll, rock and roll. Tommy is up in what looks to be the grandstand seats, or maybe the clubhouse seats, not quite sure, at Santa Anita. And Erin Birkenauer is in front of her computer back at the Bowling Green establishment. Here we are. As Kevin Hart said in one of his many performances, it's about to go down, and it is. We are about ready to get rolling with the Breeders' Cup, 2 days that horse players and horse fans look for every single year. Christmas in late October, early November, and we're going to do the handicapping contest right now. The goal here is to give you our perspective, our myriad of opinions and myriad of ways of approaching the handicapping to those races. And each one of us will have a couple of races to touch on. We all have different ways of looking at it. So be prepared for, this guy's a sheets guy. This guy likes a pace and trip guy. This guy, does it some other way. This gal does it that way. Be prepared for all sorts of different approaches. Here's the reason why, people have tuned in, that they're wanting to win. You can enter 2 contests, and this is going to be recorded, so it'll be on the website. 2 contests, one for partners, which there's going to be a $3,000 credit to the winner for any horse purchase. And one is open to prospective clients and fans and to clients, and that you get a $100 gift certificate, which ain't all that bad, and a chance to thump your chest. With that, let's get rolling with the very first race of the Breeders' Cup menu, which is the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf Sprint. This is an incredibly important race for us because we have Slider, because we have one of our own. We have 2 horses in the Breeders' Cup races. Both of them are running Friday, both of them 2-year-old colts, and both, I think, have tremendous chances. You're looking at the past performance list for the field as it starts from the rail out. And we're going to try to be very quick and efficient when we talk about these races. So for those of you that know me well, you know that I'm a Thoroughgraph Sheets guy. I've analyzed the Thoroughgraph Sheets. This is a very, very wide open race. A 7 or an 8 should win this race. And aside from a few outliers, there's a lot of balance, a lot of opportunity for prices, and for maybe a big surprise winning this race. The winning posts of this race, and it's relatively young. We're only talking about 5 or 6 years old. The 5 post, the 9 post, the 13, the 6, the 5, which tells you that the outside post in this race, despite the fact that it's 5/8 on the turf, isn't necessarily a killer. You can win from a far outside post, which of course gets all of our Slider people excited. When I look at this race, I look at the 2, No Name Mets, who is probably the strongest standout on 2 sets of sheet numbers, the Thoroughgraph, which I follow, and also the Ragozin sheets. He's the standout. He ran a 17, 8, and an 8 in his last 3 races on the Thoroughgraph sheets, and only one other horse has run anything close to that, and that's a horse, the 4. You can see part of him showing there on the past performance list. He's a horse that has run a 6 on the turf, which is the fastest number, but I think he's suspect. I think he's suspect on a firm turf course. So he's not going to be included in my trifectas and exactas. If he wins, he beats me. He's not an Aidan O'Brien coming over here from Europe type. And Aidan knows how to win these races. So the horses that I'm going to take in my superfecta would be No Nay Mets, the 9, Amidst Waves. Amidst Waves is a horse that's trained by George Weaver. He's got 2 horses in here, No Nay Mets and Amidst Waves. The 11, our very own Slider, who has run a very, very fast first-time turf number, a 10. And then the last horse is a little bit of a long shot. Give me the Beat Boys. And Cherry Blossom, I'm also including an 8, Cherry Blossom, because that is, of course, Aidan O'Brien. And the only reason I'm including Cherry Blossom is that on the Ragozin sheets, he figures. He doesn't figure as much on the Thorograph sheets. Keep in mind, there's 2 sets of sheets. They look at races in the same way, but they also come up with different calculations. So once again, I'm going to be pretty strong on No Nay Mets, but I think Slider's got a big chance with Amidst Waves and Give Me the Beat Boys. But I also think, and here's the fun part, Slider is a reasonably good shot to win the whole thing, because on the Ragozin sheets, he's one of the standouts. It's him, No Nay Mets, him and No Nay Mets, which, as one final aside, the owner of No Nay Mets has been over here in Louisville at Churchill Downs over the past week, spoke to my wife, said the one horse he feared the most, Slider. He's a Ragozin sheets guy, is the owner of No Nay Mets. And he knows that Slider has a number that's as fast as anybody in the field. So with that, the very first race in the books, let's go down the list to the next on the menu for the Breeders' Cup, which is the Juvenile Fillies, and that will be Aaron Birkenauer's responsibility.
So I am a Ragozin sheets player, and the Ragozin sheets are very similar to the Thorograph, as in the lower the number, the better the race. They take into account many different variables, including track surface, wind, pace dynamics. Sorry, my dog's barking. So the lower the number, the better the race. There are some horses who will run negative numbers. You will not see that in 2-year-old races. The one thing to keep in mind with 2-year-old races is they are young and developing and lightly raced. They are liable to jump up and run a huge number out of nowhere. So that's the one caveat when it comes to handicapping these 2-year-old races. I think this is ultimately a 2-horse race with an 11 winning it. Candide ran very well at Keeneland last time. I am not a huge fan of these 2-year-olds starting from the rail. That would be my only knock against her, but her pattern is strong. Her timing coming into the race is a little quick back, coming off a huge effort for a 2-year-old filly, but she is definitely a player. Moving down, you see Jody's Pride going to need a pretty significant step forward to get into the 11 range. Scalable ran a 20 and a 19. That's not going to do it here unless there's a miracle. Where's my ring? Unlikely fast enough. Omaha Girl needs a very big jump forward. Next horse ran a nice number in her first race, but has pretty much gone backwards. Not really usable. Tamra, she's going to be the big favorite. Very similar pattern to Candide in the sense that she ran, a mid-teens number in her first start and then came back with an 11. You're going to get no value on this filly, but I think she's your most likely winner. Her and Candide ran the same exact number last time, but what is the difference? Tamra has a lot more spacing coming into the race. So I think she's a deserving favorite in this spot. Next horse, I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce the name. Needs a big jump forward. I think the interesting play in here, and if you're going to, use this race in your multi-race wagers, I think it makes a lot of sense, to single Tamra or to use Tamra and Candide. But if you're looking for a live long shot, Bright Work would be the one. She's run some pretty solid numbers earlier in her career. And then she put in a not so great effort last time at Keeneland. That was a 2-turn race, her first time around 2 turns. What you have to ask yourself is, was it the 2 turns or did she just have a bad day? Because simply by the numbers, she's very live. And Accommodate Ava, I mean, that 16 is okay, but gonna need better. And let's see. 6. Life Talk needs to improve. Just FYI, I think she'll take some money. You know, that last race I think is a little bit hard to read, but that number did not come back very fast. And Alice Beach needs a big jump forward. So my takeaway is I truly believe it's a 2-horse race. I can't really make a case for many others. I think the wild card is Bright Work.
Very good, Aaron. Thanks so much. We'll move to the Juvenile Fillies Turf. This is the first of the route turf races on the card that afternoon. And Joe Bianca has it well up in his noggin, and now he will share it with the rest of the world.
Yeah, I was so stoked when I got this race from the assignments for which race we were going to do, because this is my strongest opinion of the entire weekend, all 14 races. I like the number 9, Carla's Way, a ton in here. She ran an absolutely dynamite race last time out in the Rockfell Stakes at Newmarket. If you watch the replay, it was kind of like a little bit like an American dirt sprint. You had 2 horses go out there going very, very fast early, big break back to the rest of the field. Carla's Way was chasing that loose leader in second, going really fast up front. That horse, the horse up front, started to pack it in around the 3/16 pole. Carla's Way took over and just never showed any signs of stopping. I was expecting the other horses to run her down, kicked away, won by multiple lengths. And it was a live race because the second and the third finishers that day came back to run 1-2 in the Group 1 Phillies Mile Stakes last in their next start. She's third off of a short layoff. I think she'll be fine stretching out to a mile. I just think she drew well, slightly outside of midfield. She's got the speed to put herself in a good spot, not lose too much ground. So this is my strongest opinion of the entire weekend, and I'm all over Carla's Way in this race. She's 9-1, 6-1 morning line. I would take 4 or 5-1, honestly. And similar to Aaron, I just want to kind of run through the sheets right here. Because I think there's a clear separator in here between horses who have run a 10 or better and horses who have run only double-digit figures. She feels pretty for the home team. Cherie DeVoe, she got a 9 1/4 right there last time out, giving Cherie her first Grade 1 win. If she runs back to that race, she's very tough. Hard to justify. It's got a 10 right there. The outside horses are a little bit slow. You scroll up a little bit though. Austere, I love that big jump from her first race, the maiden race, from a 15 1/4 to a 10 in the Kentucky Downs Stakes. So she's got a big shot for Brennan Walsh. Carla's Way got the 8 1/2 in the race I was talking about at Newmarket. Keeps growing up. Porta Fortuna, 8 1/4. So she's got to be used for Danica O'Brien. Keep scrolling up. That's a nice price right there. The 4 Lom, the new horse for Phil D'Amato. She's had a nice progression. This is her first time in the U.S., but she ran a 9 1/4 last time out. She's 15-1 morning line, so I think she's got a big shot as well. And then the 3 Buku, who ran that big race last time out in the Jessamine, crushed that field by 3 3/4 lengths. She's run back-to-back 10, so there might even be a move forward coming out of that race. A lot of the sheets guys like to see that pair up and then to go forward off of that effort. So those are the horses I would use. I would cut it off from the Thoroughgraph players. I would cut it off at a 10. And there's about 5 or 6 horses who have run that so far. But Carla's Way, go watch that replay if you haven't seen it. She absolutely dominated. And the dynamics of the race suggested that she should have been way back in the field at the end, just like the pace setter was. She kept on going. And like I said, those 2 fillies behind her were neck and neck in a Group 1 next time out. Strongest opinion of the weekend, Jeff, Carla's Way.
Joe Bianca putting the gauntlet down, saying this is my cash out before the weekend. Well done, Joe. On to Jason Blewett, hanging by Flightline and Flavian Pratt in the background. Jason, you get one of the superstar sort of glitz races of the first day, actually of the entire weekend. This is the race that everybody loves to say is the prognosticator for the Derby favorite going into their 3-year-old year. This is the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. The list of winners is legendary. Who's the winner this year?
Yeah, and it is. I mean, legendary list of winners. I like Timberlake, but this feels like a Breeders' Cup Juvenile, unlike a BC Juvie we've had in recent memory. I mean, I was even thinking back to last year, although he didn't win, Cave Rock was a monster odds on favorite. And he nearly won. He ran a very good second right behind Forte. This year, though, you're not going to be even in remotely close of an odds-on type territory. In fact, you don't see morning lines like the one you come across in the juvenile where Locked is 3.5 to 1. Okay, so he's your morning line favorite. You've got two Bafferts, beginning with Prince of Monaco at 4 to 1. The other Cox horse that I like, Timberlake, is 4 to 1. And the second Baffert horse, or I should say the third one on the outside, moved 4 to 1. So, I mean, you've got four horses between 3.5 and 4 to 1. Trip may come down. This race may come down to Trip, and that might ultimately be the deciding factor. And with that in mind, I wanted a horse like Timberlake that could lay up close, who also drew a very good post, but could also sit off horses. Starting with Prince of Monaco, one of the three Baffert horses, I didn't think he was very impressive at 5 cents to the dollar last time out, winning the Del Mar Futurity over his stablemate Miramati, who's still a maiden in that race and had not run well and was a very hyped up maiden, in fact, all summer long. And I'm wondering if Prince of Monaco, being by Speightstown, just would prefer sprinting around one turn. I was not blown away with his last out race, so slightly against him. Timberlake was able to rebound off a pretty disappointing, or I guess slow race closing weekend or closing day at Saratoga in the hopeful. But the way he won the Champagne, got a big number. Those numbers I wrote in on Notability, by the way, in the pink font. Those are the Ragozin numbers. I learned. And again, I'm not like a huge sheets guy. I prefer the traditional, I guess, quote unquote, daily racing form, watching replays, using Formulator. But in terms of looking at a speed figure number outside of Bayer, I learned years ago on Ragozin. So those are my preferred, I guess, sheet numbers, if you will. So those are the Ragozin numbers. And look, the Champagne came up fast. He got a 10. Second fastest race or effort in the entire field. And the way he was just powering away at the end strikes me as a horse who not only, again, rebounded off the hopeful, but got the mile last time out. And I think that bodes well with how nicely he won going 8 furlongs. In my mind, that translates to just as good of an effort stretching out to a mile and a 16th. I have no issue with either Todd Pletcher trained horse in the race, beginning with Locked, who's the 6 here, who is a gun runner, who ran fast late in the Saratoga meet. He did not have an easy trip. In fact, right around the half-mile pole of the Breeders' Futurity, I did not really like his chances as the big 3 to 5 favorite. And he still outgained and outfinished the Line Steward in a good effort in a Breeders' Futurity that came up a strong race on numbers. The other Todd horse, Fierceness, of course, bombed in the Champagne. That was a really surprising, just non-effort out of him. I will say, though, and I don't think I'm going out on a limb or alone in this, I thought he was the best 2-year-old, bar none, that ran at Saratoga, either sex, all summer long. And he has the fastest. I mean, on Ragozin, that 7 that he ran first out on the eve of the Travers, August 25th, sloppy track aside, that's the fastest number in the entire Breeders' Cup juvenile field. I know egos are involved, and we all have egos. Look, and although Mike Rapoli is, a very close friend of mine, Mike likes being in the big races. I just don't see Todd or Mike, for that matter, shipping this horse from New York to California to run in this race if they didn't feel as though not only did he fit, but he was going to put that Champagne effort in the rearview mirror. I think he's a very, very, very dangerous horse. And look, of the 3 Bafferts, I prefer Muth the most, who won the American Pharaoh, got the mile and a 16th last time out. But as I went through the field, whether I'm right or wrong, my gut feeling is the horses that ran on the East Coast, and even looking at the Breeders' Futurity, so we'll say, the Kentucky prep through the East Coast, I think as a whole, those 2-year-olds, they were deeper and better fields than than the preps out west at Del Mar and Santa Anita that the Baffert horses were winning. That's my gut feeling going in. So I like Timberlake. I like Fierceness. And I don't think if you're looking for a long shot, I don't think Noted is hopeless. That was go back and watch that win over Dornoch, his only dirt race to date in the Sapling. That was a very good effort out of him. So it's a wide open Breeders' Cup Juvenile, and really, really looking forward to it. Hopefully an hour or so after we get it done in the turf sprint there, the juvenile turf sprint with Slider.
Great segue. It's a great segue, Jason Blewett, and great analysis as well. Always looking to hear what Jason has to say, as he was actually doing this for a living for all those years with Naira and also with the Stronach Group, this handicapping thing that we're all thinking we're experts at. We're going to move on to a guy who actually does put his money where his mouth is and plays the races on a regular basis. That's Tom Bellhouse, who's sitting up there in the seats at Santa Anita, the great race place. And Tommy, we started off with a Breeders' Cup race where we have representation. And Slider, of course, has been the darling of our crew on the West Coast. And actually, we have some partners on the East Coast that have a piece of him. So he's really been a favorite and has done nothing wrong. Almost mirrored at the beginning of the day, at the end of the day with the juvenile turf, because Carson's Run has been the darling of the East Coast faction. And yes, there's some West Coasters that own a piece of him as well, too. And both horses have a shot. Both horses have a legitimate shot. So with that little preamble, that kind of, overture, let's get to the symphony. Go for it, Thomas.
Thank you, Jeff. And it's funny, both were bought at that same OBS sale, and just brings back just great memories of when you buy a horse like this and you can remember the day you saw him for the first time, and it's been magical. But I tell you what, the one takeaway I have from this whole first day as we go through this is how much post position has probably impacted what we'll see on the odds board on almost all of these races, with some really significant horses getting tough draws. In this case, obviously Carson drawing number 14 will impact our price a little bit. Not that I think that it really is a huge detriment with his running style. But I'm gonna focus my attention on two horses. Obviously Carson's Run, who if he had more of an inside post, I think would be a clear second to third choice in the wagering. And then the European River Tybor, who just looks like a really, really significant horse going forward. Was third in the two grade ones back to back. He won a 20 horse field graded stake at Coventry. Aidan O'Brien, Ryan Moore. These are the kind of races that these guys come over here to win with juveniles. The one challenge that I find in this race is, as I look through it, I look for pace. And there's not an exceptional, this horse will clearly be on the lead, other than the Mark Casse horse we tangled with up in Canada, My Boy Prince. Now, I don't think My Boy Prince is fast enough to win this race, but I think he's going to play a significant role on the front end, because if somebody else doesn't go with him, he could get a fairly unobstructed lead in this race, and it'll be really tough to run him down late. So my focus is going to be on, obviously, Carson's Run and River Tybor. I mentioned My Boy Prince with a speed angle, and three other horses that you might want to use and dabble in underneath. One is the local horse Endlessly from Mike McCarthy, undefeated, an Oscar performance out of a Langfure mare. Has done nothing wrong, and it's just his home track. So you have to respect that. I mean, he's going to, just like with us with Slider, he's going to walk over. This horse is going to be doing the same thing. Agate Road, Vinny Viola, Michael Poli horse that has been just nothing short of spectacular on the East Coast. The Quality Road out of Yellow Agate, who ironically was trained by Christophe Clement back in the day. And then one horse that's going to be 30-1 that I'll just throw out there, Graham Motion, Tok Tok. If you go back and watch that race at Keeneland, that'll be the trip horse, because that horse had just the worst trip you've ever seen come running there at the end. And I don't think that was an exceptionally fast race, but Graham seems to show up on these days with horses, and he's got Johnny V back in the saddle. Might be somebody to fill out your tries and your supers. But I'm going to be pressing my play on River Tybor and Carson's Run.
All right. I love a man who uses his head and his heart with his handicapping. And actually, with Carson's run, he's using both his head and his heart. It makes a lot of sense, and it's exciting as a prospect for us to finish off the day with a big, big, monumental, and historic win. All right, let's move on to day two. We'll start with the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. This is my my responsibility, and the last one that you'll hear about from a Thoroughgraph Sheets perspective. This is a small field, and got smaller, unfortunately, with Practical Move and his tragic demise. Had a heart attack several days ago. So the field is smaller, and it's compact, and it's also, I think, in some respects, it's got one big, big favorite, and the rest of them are kind of like hoping to be close enough. I think, based on what I'm seeing, that a -1 or a -2 is going to win this race. And Cody's Wish, who is 9-5, and I believe maybe somebody else can help me out here. Is he the shortest price of all the horses in every race? There might be
Tamara and the Juvenile Fillies is the shortest.
Tamara, yeah, she's odds on, isn't she? She's at odds on. So he's right up there in terms of the shortest price. And Cody's Wish has won has run a -4, a -1, and a -2 in his last 3 races. He's right there. He won it last year. This is a horse that I think has he's a big mountain to climb for anybody else. Let me go through the field here. I'll go now from the inside horse out. So that'd be Stage Raider. This is Cherie DeVaux's horse, the horse that is, of course, the half brother to Justify. Stage Raider ran a 17, but then a 0 and a 0. This is kind of my bomber pick. Cherie is white hot right now, and the horse maybe not a negative rag sheet, or excuse me, Thoroughgraph sheet number yet, but he's close. He's right on the cusp. We'll move past Practical Move. We'll go on to Zozos. This is probably my second or third choice in the race. Zozos has run a 0, a 3, and a -0 in his last, -0 in his last race. He's right on the cusp. And of course, we all know how successful Brad Cox is on Breeders' Cup Day. So I think Zozos is not that far away from Cody's Wish. Next up is Charge It. He's run a -0, a 0, and a 3 in his last races. I don't think that's fast enough. I don't see him reversing things, despite the fact that he's taken the blinkers off. He's had them for 5 or 6 races in a row. Taking the blinkers off, I think they're really trying just to add a little oomph. He's going to need plenty of it against this field. Skippy Longstockings. This is, along with Zozos, really the ones that I think will figure the most in this race besides Cody's Wish. Ran a 2, a 0, and a -1 in his last race. He's on the come right now. Tyler Gaffalione was the king of Keeneland. Granted, that's Keeneland, not the Breeders' Cup. But he is coming in having ridden his eyeballs out at the last big meet here in Kentucky. The 6, Algiers, ran a 0, a -2, and a 5. He has not run in some time. He didn't run in some time. Then he ran at Keeneland and ran okay. At Woodbine, and ran okay there. I just think he's up against it. I just don't think he's fast enough. The 7 is, the seventh horse, the 8 post position. Sherrills B, our own Dallas Stewart, has a significant long shot in here. I think he'll be a little bit longer than 20-1. He's run a 10, a 6, and a 14. You got to love Dallas Stewart's mentality. You got to be in it to win it. He's in it. I don't see him winning it. And then National Treasures on the outside. This is a horse who's run a 4, a 5, and a 2. Uncharacteristically, I don't think he's really going to be one of the ones in this race. And Bob Baffert usually brings a lot of horses that are going to be right there in the mix, horses that'll take a bunch of money. This horse is not the one. Cody's Wish, Skippy Longstockings, Zozos, and a bomber, if you want to kind of really shake things up, in Stage Raider. And that is the first Breeders' Cup race of the day on Saturday, the Dirt Mile. Let's move back to Joe Bianca and touch on the filly and mare turf.
Yeah, I mean, this race is all about the 6 in Spiral, and she's going to be a pretty short price. She's 5-2 morning line, but I think she's probably going to be in the 7-5, 8-5 range by post. And to me, there's no doubt that she is the most talented horse in the race. She's the most accomplished horse in the race. She's one, two, three, four, 5-time Group 1 winner overseas. She ran maybe her best race of her life last time in the Sun Chariot Stakes, just cruising by 3 3/4 lengths. She's beaten the boys a bunch of times, but she's never been beyond a mile. And John Gosden knows her. There were plenty of spots for him to put her in at 1 1/4 and up if he thought that that's what she was going to be best at. And he didn't do it. She's run 12 times, every time going a mile. And she is the most talented horse. She's the horse to beat, but I just don't like short prices like this, trying something new in a big stage race. There are a couple other horses who are interesting to me. Obviously, an Italian has to be used. She's awesome. She just shows up every single time. 12 out of 13 in the exacta. You know what she's going to do, especially from the rail. She's going to pop out to the front, try to take him as far as she can. She did run a great second, going 1 mile and 3/16 last year in the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Turf. She did get caught, though, this year, going 1 1/8 and a mile. So I'm not really looking to her in terms of alternatives if I'm against a favorite. The horse that I really like is the Japanese horse, Win Maryland. And she's going to be a big price. She was 9th, 9th, and 6th in her last 3 races. But if you go back a little bit further than that, she won the Hong Kong Vase against boys last December at Sha Tin. If she runs back to that race, I think she's going to be right there with Inspiral. And if you look at her form, she's kind of rounding back into that form with the time form ratings. She got an 86 first time off the layoff this year, then up to a 112 last time out, even though she was 9th. So I think she's rounding back to that good race, and she's going to be a monster price. And I think the 7 Lindy is interesting for Brennan Walsh. She's a lightly raced 3-year-old. She's 7 out of 8 in the exacta. She was a really good closing second last time in the QE2 at Keeneland, 3rd off the layoff. I just think she's sitting on a big race, and I'm a little bit against Inspiral stretching out to 10 furlongs. So when I'm against a favorite like that, I'm not usually going to land on the second choice or the third choice. I'm going to try to find someone at a big price who can get involved. And those are my main 2, Win Maryland and Lindy. I will use an Italian protectively. I'll use Inspiral protectively. But I just, like I said, trying something new in the Breeders' Cup, going to be a short price. She's obviously the most talented horse in the race, but I'm against her in this spot.
Thanks, Joe Bianca. Don Leonard is gracing our screen, sporting her purple, which is the color of the week. Got her Carson's Run hat and jacket there. I did want to talk a little bit about this, Dawn. You're going to do the Filly and Mare Sprint, which is a race that we had a horse in the inaugural way back in the late 2000s, Dream Rush. And we've had a number of horses in this race. This is a race we know well. So I know that it's a race that you handicap well because you've had to do it on a number of occasions with our breeders, with our West Point horses in it. So who do you like here?
Well, I think, thanks, Jeff. I really like Goodnight Olive. I mean, it's not a hard pick, right? I love using rag sheets, and I've had very good luck specifically in the Breeders' Cup races using rag. And I also throw in some Thorough Manager numbers because I like to gauge trends using Thorough Manager. So, I mean, really, when you look at this whole field, Goodnight Olive is a true standout. She's the defending champ. She's following the same race and prep spacing that she did last year before she won it. She's been knocking heads with the top runners in the Grade 1 races. Unfortunately, she's not going to face Echo Zulu here, which I think leaves a pretty big void that makes Goodnight Olive look even more of a standout. Her number power is awesome. Her latest rags were 5 and 4. She runs top buyers, triple digits. Her throwgraph numbers are the highest in this field. She's a specialist at 7 furlongs. The one thing I have heard in terms of what might be a knock against her in this race is people have been saying, oh, she's got the 1 hole in a chute. Well, yeah, that sometimes is not ideal, but she's got Irod on top of her. He's not going to get bossed around at all. She's got plenty of experience in her PPs running and breaking from the 1 or 2 hole. I think what's going to happen is number 3, Ida, and number 7, Society, are going to clear this field several paths out from her. So I just don't see her getting shuffled and shut down early at all. I think those 2 are going to go slug it out and then eventually weaken for Goodnight Olive to close to win. Just digging into that a little bit more, I know Society is going to be another formidable competitor for her. This filly was visually impressive at Charlestown. She was last out in the pink ribbon. I saw her there. I was there with Baba that day, and she easily defeated Frank's Rocket, which was a 1.5 million earner. And she also runs triple digit buyers, and she certainly could probably get away and run with it, but I just don't think that's going to happen. that Ida's going to press her because she's got blinkers and she's going to be right up there hounding Society. And I think they're just going to get, go at it hard and get tired. I do want to mention one horse, Meheki or Mahake. She's the Japanese horse. And normally, like international horses, I just kind of go la 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 and glaze over because I don't know how to, they don't have all the PPs in their running lines, and you just get a result. Well, what does that mean? How does the horse run like this? So I just ignore it. But this horse, you say, why is she in this race? They were AE in the turf sprint, and her connections opted to go here. She's 7 for 7 lifetime, and she's earned like $2.6 million, which kind of puts her right up there in terms, above earnings of some of these other fillies in this race. She does explode from off the pace. I looked up pictures of her. She's physically imposing. She's got a great chest on her. She's been running in the top Japanese turf sprint races. There's 5 of those in her DRF PPs alone, and she's been competing against males in large fields. So I started going, and then according to Japanese media, her pedigree is rife with dirt runners, so it would not surprise her connections if she did run well on the dirt. There's very little inbreeding in her, but she is inbred to Sunday Silence and Danehill. And again, when I was looking into her, I love learning something new every day in this business, it seems. And she is a member of the so famed white-haired family, which is a line of exceedingly rare, pure white racehorses whose striking appearance has captivated Japanese racegoers for the last 3 decades. So although she is not white, she comes from a family, like 3 of her mares were pure white racehorses. So I just thought she was interesting. I'm going to put $2 across the board on her. I'm going to listen the rest of the week to see if anybody's talking about her. How does she behave in the morning? Her knock is that she does wear a lot of funky gear on her head to try to keep her controllable during the races. So I'm going to listen to see what she's doing, out in the mornings in California. So my rational play for me, though, is to look for some doubles using Goodnight Olive on both legs of those. And maybe a game time try box with Olive, Sadler's filly in there, Kirsten Bosch, who's run her best buyer since adding blinkers the last 2 out, and then the Japanese filly. So there you go.
Well done, Lady in Purple. Tom Bellhouse, the Breeders' Cup Turf Mile has some real legends. I mean, some unbelievable legends that have won it. You just go, from Mies, Goldakova, 2 of the fillies that won the Breeders' Cup Mile. The unbelievable Lure. It goes on and on. De Haas, who came off what was like a 10-year hiatus to win that race for crazy Michael Dickinson. This race is so exciting, so stacked, so cool. Why not have Tom Bellhouse dismantle it? Go for it, my friend.
Our buddy Dale Romans will be very upset that you didn't mention Court Vision at like gazillion.
Of course.
It rolls right off the tongue, doesn't it? Miesk, Golden Colt, Court Vision.
Yeah, Andre Fabre, Dale Romans. Right. Sure.
I'll take Dale Romans every time. I think the big challenge with a race like this is the longer you follow this high level of racing in the Breeders' Cups, you end up getting pets, and we all do it. And this race is full of my pets. Casa Creed, one of he's the modern day Sultan of Saratoga. Last year Cheryl Spite, if I'm not mistaken, finished second at 50-something to 1. Master of Hounds is a great local horse that doesn't win a lot, but always is in the money, on these races. And there's a horse, De Jour, that I know our old pal Joe Migliori was underbidder on when he went out on his own. And who was bidding against him up buying a Temple City? It turns out it was Bob Baffert. So there's some familiar names in here, unfortunately, and they might be fun to put underneath. But my focus is totally on the Europeans here. I look at Songline from Japan, and it's a mare going against colts. That doesn't faze me in this particular case. We've seen it with Uni, we've seen it with Golden Cova and Mies. This is the one race that I find that fillies and mares have competed exceptionally well against the males. So Songline is going to be the focus of all my play. There's a couple other horses from Europe. I'm going to butcher the name, Maj, who ran up in Canada, Kalina, and Master of Seas, who unfortunately got post 14, which will be difficult. But those 4 Euros, I'm really going to focus my play on Songline and then fill in with Euros underneath, and maybe more than looks, just because Cherie's going so well right now that I can't think of any trainer who's coming in hotter than her right now. So I think that this particular race today, everything goes through the Euros, Jeff.
Thank you very much, Tommy. And just as an aside, what kind of a hellacious, awesome, and joy-filled weekend would be with 2 West Point winners on Friday and throw in a Cherie DeVaux winner in the mile turf? That would be awesome sauce.
Your credit card, buddy.
All right, Aaron Birkenauer, you're up with another one of the glamour division. I'll call it, just like the turf mile, the OG races for the original Breeders' Cup. This would be the distaff, the older fillies. It has produced some unbelievable stretch drives, and I know you are capable of giving us your insight on this year's edition.
Yep, let's try to do this again without the dog barking. Sorry about that. But I think this is an incredible betting race from a Rags and Sheets standpoint. I think it'll take about an 8 to win, and there are several fillies and mares in here that can get the job done. I think the pace dynamics are going to be very interesting because your 1-2 choices in the betting like to be on the lead. So who's going to go for it? Who's going to stalk? That's the big question. So going through these, who's your filly? Going to need a big step forward. She'll be a big long shot, and deservedly so. Amo Ray has run an 8 before, but I'm not a huge fan of horses who just run a big number out of nowhere and then they can't replicate it. This tells me that she really is kind of a 13, maybe an 11 type filly that probably isn't going to run the race of her life. Ideally, you'd love to see a horse who, even if they regress a little bit, can get the job done. I don't really like to focus on kind of these outlier numbers. Pretty Mischievous is a 3-year-old. Naturally, I tend to shy away from 3-year-olds in older filly and mare races, but looking at the history, 3-year-olds are capable of getting the job done. Monomoy Girl, Untappable, Beholder. They're some of the most prolific fillies in history that have won this race as 3-year-olds. From the numbers, she's got to take a jump forward and run the race of her life. I think she can do it. I think if the top 2 get into a speed duel, she could be right there picking up the pieces. I mean, in this filly, I think she's probably the prettiest filly in training. That big white face, just loved her in the Oaks. She's just awesome. And you can't count her out because she's hit the board in every start and won 7 of 10 races. And, I think she's going to be the 3rd choice. And I think if you get a little bit of value on her, I think she's pretty good to use for the win. Idiomatic will take a lot of money at the windows, deservedly so. Like I said, I think the 8 will win the race. She just marches with these 8s. The big question with her is if she gets hooked with Bob Baffert's filly, who is just to her outside. If you're going to get in a speed duel, I prefer to be on the outside, not on the inside of it. I think the Adari Manor has the hometown advantage that I think is important in these 2-turn dirt races. Her last race came back a little bit slow. I don't really know what to make of that, but she is riding a, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 race win streak coming into here and deserves respect. It's just a question of who's going to take back, Florent Giroux or Juan Hernandez. Search Results is another. I mean, again, some of these fillies and mares are just amazing and they all deserve respect just because they're so consistent. She's hit the board in 15 of 16 starts. I mean, that is just crazy consistent. And you can see from her numbers, I mean, most of these are single digits. If you get back to the middle of last year, she was running 5s and 6s. That wins this race hands down easy. This year, I wouldn't even say she's lost a step. The numbers have just come back a little bit slower. She is another one who has speed, but looking at her past performances, I think she's probably a little bit more tractable than the 2 fillies who are inside who are going to take a lot more money. So I would give her a pretty big chance, especially considering her tactical speed. Wet Paint is a 3-year-old for Brad Cox. I think it's going to take a lot for her to jump up. She does have good timing into the race. I just don't think she's quite there yet. Maybe next year. Randomize is another interesting horse, lightly raced. She is a 3-year-old, so you can't really knock her for that. Really didn't get going. Ran once as a 2-year-old. Really didn't get going until the spring of this year. She's got some nice numbers, and I think she deserves a look. I mean, listen, there's a lot of these fillies that are in this kind of 8, 9, 10 range that nobody will be surprised if they jump up and win. Clairiere is the big wild card. I've been a huge Clairiere fan forever. How could you not? I mean, look at all these races she's won, single digit numbers, and that come from behind style is just makes your heart drop. But her last 2 races, what do you make of them? Are they outliers, or is she just not the same Clairiere we saw last year? I do think she's probably going to take more money than she deserves based on her form, just because of her name, and I think she's probably emotional choice for a lot of fans. Desert Dawn, like I said earlier, I don't really like to bet on horses with that outlier good number. And if you were going to take an absolute long shot who has a chance in here, I would take this filly, Le Davida. You can see several single digit numbers coming into the race, and she is 30 to 1, 20 to 1 on the morning line. So she's the one that I think if somebody's going to light up the board in this race, it's her. But I think this is the type of race I have to sleep on it, because there are so many fillies and mares in this race that could win, that are capable of throwing in a good number. It's really just going to depend on what the 2 favorites do coming out of the gate.
Thanks very much to you, young Ms. Birkenauer. And we'll move back to Tom Bellhouse, sitting there in the not so cheap seats at Santa Anita, to discuss the Breeders' Cup Turf, the marathon of all marathons. It's placed a little bit in a different spot in the overall card, probably due to the West Coast and TV, wanting to get some of these top races in the primetime TV sort of window. But Tommy, I kept looking at the field as they drew it and kept saying to myself, oh my God, he's in it. Oh geez, he's in it. That race is super stacked, is probably the glitziest from who all is showing up from my perspective. And I'm just dying to hear what you have to say about it.
Well, I'm still trying to get over Aaron talking about Clairiere, who I seem like I've invested probably half a mortgage on in the last couple of years, especially last year at Keeneland. But Jeff, I tell you what, a few years ago, a blind squirrel found an acorn, and I fell in love with a 3-year-old colt in this race called Ternaua, and he was the key to my whole play at Keeneland that day. And I think I've come into the same spot with a deep impact colt trained by Aidan O'Brien and Ryan Moore, Auguste Rodin, a 3-year-old going against older, just looks like a kind of horse that I'm in love with, that he just has gone on from 2 to 3. He's had a couple clunkers, like got bothered in the races and things like that. So, that'll help our price a little bit. But I think if this horse gets clear and runs his race, he is going to be very, very tough. There's a few other horses. John Austin's I don't even going to try to say it. Mustaldov, King of Steel, Roger Varian's horse with Frankie Dettori. I'm going to center my play on the Euros. That being said, there is one horse, Up to the Mark, who, if he was running in the mile, I think I would have taken him over the Japanese mare. I just think Up the Mark is such an exciting horse. He's done absolutely nothing wrong since he's gone to the grass, and he's improved with every start. He has that, breathtaking, huge move that he makes in every race. And there's going to be a lot of horses coming towards the end, and I know he'll be one of them. I think if you really held on, I'm gonna lean heavily on Auguste Rodin, and then I'm gonna use Up to the Mark, and then fill in with, Arresto, the Gosden, and the Varian European shippers. But it's an exciting race. I'm not even doing it justice with all the horses that I haven't mentioned, but something about the 3-year-old colt in this race that I just think this is where he takes a step forward, and this is going to be one of the keys to my Saturday play.
Well done, Tom. Okay, let's move on to Jeff Lowe, who can do more than run the board and keep this thing moving from a logistics perspective. He can handicap with the best of them. And we've given him the Breeders' Cup Classic. Understandably, there's been a little bit of there have been some defections due to some unfortunate events leading up to the race, but it's still one heck of a race. So Jeff Lowe, take it away.
Yeah, if you have a strong opinion in this classic, man, you can make some money. This has been a war of attrition. We lost Go Rocket Go, Mage, Arcangelo, just within the last 10 days or so. So some nice horses in here. Zandon won a grade 2 by 4.25 lengths last time, but he's 12-1 on the morning line here. Nice horse. If you like him, you can have a nice day late in the day on Saturday. White Barrio probably is the horse that caught my eye the most here. He's had a little bit of a foot issue, which depends on how much you want to make of something like that. Big Brown had a foot issue before the Belmont Stakes when he, came up very short trying to sweep the Triple Crown. Same trainer, Rick Dutrow. How much stock you put into that? I think it's noteworthy that this is nothing new for this horse. He's had some reports of foot trouble throughout his career, but that was a huge breakthrough at Saratoga in the Whitney. He ran a 4 on the rags and sheets, which is a standout in this race. He's had good spacing leading up to the Breeders' Cup. He's been out there. I think that he's the one to beat. There's no flight line in this race, that's for sure. You'll get through the field here a little bit. Brett has another horse, Saudi Crown, who's coming to his own. Nice horse. And then you have the Japanese horse. The Japan contingent continues to take these cracks at the Breeders' Cup. They had a huge day at Del Mar a few years ago. And with this classic not being the strongest field you'll ever see there, is this the horse that could, really just set the world afire in the Breeders' Cup Classic? I don't know. He's 7 for 8 on the dirt. Can't really knock him. He won the Dubai World Cup, not the strongest World Cup you'll ever see. He has not been a good student in the starting gate at Santa Anita this week. That worries me. He ran a 7 in the World Cup on the rags and sheets. So little to do there. I would say that you can't dismiss him. That's for sure. The jockey is never ridden in America. He's going to have a race on the marathon on Friday. Kind of hard to put a lot of to really put, you're going against Irad Ortiz, John Velasquez, Jose Ortiz, Flavian Pratt on Arabian Night, who Arabian Night is the horse I would take a stand against. He has a little bit of a look of a horse that won a Santa Anita in the Classic about 10 years ago for Bob Baffert, Iron. He got out there and just stole it in the Classic. Is this falling into Bob's lap again? He's not fast enough on the sheets. He ran a 9 in the Pacific Classic, which is kind of hard to believe, but he got the job done that day. Flavian picked him over Zandon. But the pace scenario you have to look at a little bit, as it's not the speediest scenario. You have Saudi Crown's probably going to be the other horse out front. If it does get real fast, I could see Senor Buscador picking up a piece at the end. He's run fast enough races. He's running the 6s. And he's had quite a bit of experience out there in California. An intriguing classic, not a vintage classic, but some good opportunity there from Benny's standpoint.
Very good, Jeff. Take a, cold glass of water, get a sip, get some oxygen, because we're going right back your direction with the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint. The Turf Sprint, sort of a, almost like a bookend to the juvenile Turf Sprint at the beginning of all of this, the very first race. And the Turf Sprint is the second to last race on the Breeders' Cup menu. It's a race that historically, I think, you know, the Americans have done pretty well, but the Europeans have certainly had their big horses in this race as well too. So, what's your take on the turf sprint this year?
I'm looking at the fillies quite, as I don't think it's necessarily a slam dunk for any horse in this field. Carabelle won it last year. She didn't run the best speed figure. She won it with an 11 last year. Out up front, she's a champion. It's hard to take a real strong stand against a champion. And she's had a couple of races where she's caught soft turf the last couple times. Same thing for Christoph's filly, Roses for Deborah, an emerging filly. You could kind of put her in the same class, probably, as Carabelle, if you look out what's capable there. But I'm going to look toward Motorious. She's the home filly for Phil D'Amato. California horses usually win this race when it's there. A few years ago, you had a horse for Pete Miller, a filly that won at Del Mar. Her name's escaping me right now, which is terrible because she's oh my, Belvoir Bay, filly I really have a fondness for. Motorious kind of looks similar to her in form. They both ran about the same numbers. She's a horse that'll run a 7 pretty consistently. So that's where I'm going to be looking in the turf sprint.
Thank you, Jeff Lowe, and thanks for putting in the back-to-back, extreme efforts there. We finished things off with with the regular sprint, the dirt sprint. Another one of the OG races, Jason Blewett, and historically a race that, makes your heart pound the entire way. What's this one shaping up to look like?
Well, I think, and again, I don't know how I feel. I understand college football, and that is why, of course, the Classic is not the last BC race on Saturday. I don't know how I feel about it. It's a little odd looking at the card just from, I'm such a stingy purist and traditionalist. I think a lot of racing fans and horse players are. But regardless, I think taking and mentioning the Classic, I think this Breeders' Cup Sprint shares one similar component in that, for me, and I say this with all due respect, I don't think it's ultimately a vintage renewal. I really don't. And my opinion in this race is it's rather humdrum and on the boring side, where going through, I think your defending winner, and of course, last year's sprint champion in Elite Power for the great Bill Mott, I think he's going to be really tough in his repeat bid to win this race again. He didn't beat Gunite last out, and they've had such a fun rivalry. So, again, I don't want to sound too negative. It is neat having these different sort of subsections, and you've got, multiple sort of compartments within the entire field. And I think first and foremost is Elite Power, looking for back-to-back wins in the sprint. Only 2 horses in a 39-year history with Midnight Lute and Roy H have won the Breeders' Cup Sprint consecutive times. So again, that'll be a great accomplishment. And then you've got that rematch against Gunite, and they've had this fun rivalry going for quite some time. And then look, you've got the Bob Baffert trained lightly raced 3-year-old. I know Jeff Lowe just mentioned Bayern and him getting some similarities with Bayern and Arabian Night. Well, you've got Speedboat Beach by Bayern coming in off that fast race and tough loss against Dr. Schivel. So you've got your Californian contingent as well. But in the end, I do think Elite Power, although he did not win the Forgo at 3-5, I think when it comes down to it, 6 furlongs is just his trip. And he lays up close and he grinds out the win. And I think he's very tough here. But again, Gunite always runs well. And it's a similar situation to Elite Power's loss in the Forgo behind him, where, okay, you go, well, man, Gunite was 1-5 and he lost at Parks. I'm not sure a mile is really his thing or his best trip. So he's turning back to a more appropriate distance. The real wild card is Speedboat Beach. This is a lightly raced, soon to be 4-year-old who, again, was coming in off a very long layoff. In fact, was under 6-1 in last year's juvenile turf sprint at Keeneland, didn't run well, handled the mile in his 2-year-old finale on the grass, but was going to a surface that he had only tried once and got that crazy fast win as a 2-year-old first out for Bob Baffert. So he's the real wild card. I like the seasoning, as silly as it sounds, that Elite Power and Gunite have on Speedboat Beach. And although Dr. Shibbles danced a lot of dances, I just think Elite Power and Gunite are better horses than the cast that ran in the Santa Anita Sprint Championship. Wishing our good buddy Dallas Stewart, and again, Dallas is not afraid to take shots and to take some wild swings. I will say, and he's been pretty ambitious with Hoist the Gold, who's out of an old West Point mare, by the way, in tacit approval, which is pretty neat. Dallas has done a really nice job with this horse. I know there's been some crazy spots, including the Met Mile at almost 50-1, but he won the prep last time out against a way easier field than the Phoenix. And I would not be upset if Hoist the Gold ran a big race for Dallas and Johnny V. But again, I have sort of a just run-of-the-mill opinion in the sprint to close down the card here on Saturday. And here's to a great and safely run Breeders' Cup, 40th Breeders' Cup at Santa Anita. I'm gonna take Elite Power over Gunite. And as a fan, I'll wrap up and I won't babble, I promise, but it got me thinking, with this being sort of a milestone anniversary of the Breeders' Cup, with the 40th anniversary. My first Breeders' Cup as a newly minted fan was the 1993 version at Santa Anita, where Arkong won. And I remember wanting Sky Beauty to win the distaff so bad. And I was a big fan of DeHare that year in the juvenile. So, I mean, time flies, but it's neat being out here. And the fact that, fills me with a lot of pride that the stable's got a couple of horses running in 2 Breeders' Cup races on Friday. So again, wishing the entire team, the stable, all of our partners, and certainly Slider and Carson's run a great Breeders' Cup. It's going to be a wonderful weekend out here in Arcadia, California.
Well done, Jason. Way to cap it off in stellar fashion. We do have a few questions, or at least one question that's been posed to us already from Mike Carmely. And Mike wants to ask both Aaron and I guess Jason the following question. This is what Mike says, I consider both Bright Work and Fierceness to be somewhat troublesome horses. I like them both, but I don't know what to think about their latest efforts. What were their excuses? Aaron, can you go first with Bright Work?
I mean, I think the most obvious thing to hang your hat on is that it was the 2 turns. She had run such good races leading into that. But look, these are 2-year-olds, and 2-year-old fillies are very temperamental. So I think that's what makes it a little bit difficult to read. Sometimes horses just have bad days. So, but if you're looking, I think, Jeff, your line is the numbers are what the numbers are. If you cross that race out, she's very live. So maybe the connections had a little bit of an excuse, a physical excuse that they were able to address in time and still run. But I think that's probably the most logical excuse. If she runs another poor race around 2 turns, I think, you can say with a good degree of certainty that she's probably not a Kentucky Oaks prospect and will likely be focusing on the 1-turn races as a 3-year-old.
Well done. Okay, Jason, Fierceness?
No, it's a great question, Mike. And I'm sure there are going to be a lot of people looking at Fierceness in particular, and they're going to say, I just don't want this horse. Had the wet track win first out, as impressive as it was, but he did not run a step last time out in the Champagne as a heavy favorite. I will say he did stumble. I mean, if you go back and watch that race, he broke very awkwardly. And as Aaron was saying, they're 2-year-olds, they're young horses. Perhaps he just didn't have it. And Irad sensed that he had no horse and essentially wrapped up on him. I go back with that horse in particular to what I said when I was talking about the race. Again, I know egos are involved in everybody. I don't care who you are. Everybody wants their horses to run on Breeders' Cup weekend. Given how much hype there was, and Mike Rapoli had told me before the meet even began, he said, I have a homebred out of Nona Bella who's a grandson of Nona Mia by City of Light, this horse is going to be an absolute monster. And he hadn't even named the horse yet. And again, you may go with this, you may not. With the promise this horse, and as great as he was first out when he won at Saratoga, I just don't see Todd giving Fierceness the green light if he didn't feel as though this horse was going to run a lot better here on Friday afternoon. They're just not going to ship him to California he may not win, but if they didn't feel he was going to run more in line with what we saw in upstate New York as opposed to what we saw downstate.
Okay, Jason, thank you for that. And thank you to Mike for the question that provoked good dialogue here. I don't know if we have any other chat or Q&A questions from the crew. We've gone about an hour here, so I can understand we may be pushing the envelope for attention, for the attention of everybody. I do have somebody that popped on here. Go ahead. Whoop, nope, maybe not. I've got about 50 or more partners that are here, so I don't know if I see any raised hands. I do not. All right, going once, going twice. If you have a question, now's your time. Otherwise, we'll see a good number of you on Friday. Well, actually Thursday for the party at Serona's at 3:00 Pacific time, second floor of the clubhouse there at Santa Anita. And then we'll see everybody on Friday and Saturday that's going to be in town. Going to be a great Breeders' Cup. Weather's going to be fabulous. Racing's going to be fabulous. Our ability to create magic just by getting together and loving the game, that'll be fabulous as well too. So for the assembled panel, and I'm talking about Jeff and Aaron and Joe and Tommy and Jason and Dawn and myself, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Let's go to the races.